And that is a threat, because Judaism obviously won't survive if people just lose touch with it, and they're only Jewish by birth or upbringing, but not by practice.
Shalom Rav Yisroel Hamcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisroel Hamcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisroel Hamcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav.
Hi, David, and thank you for agreeing to do the interview with us today. A couple of questions I will ask you about our Interfaith event today. So the first question is, how can you identify if a building is a synagogue?
That's actually a very interesting question, Rune, because you can't. There's nothing that really makes a synagogue a synagogue. If you go on the internet and you look at images, you could see a lot of the big main synagogues that do have a look about them, and particularly they'll have some Hebrew writing on the front. The synagogue that I'm going to be showing you photographs of, Cardiff Reform Synagogue, used to be a Methodist chapel. And so whenever I give people directions how to get there, I say, look for what appears to be a church, because that's what it was. Many small synagogues are just held in people's houses, so that there's nothing specific to what makes a synagogue in terms of the building's appearance. But what is really quite interesting and actually quite sad in these times is that when I joined Cardiff Reform Synagogue in the mid-1980s, there was a big sign outside that identified it as a synagogue. There is now nothing from the outside that says that it's a synagogue. And I visited other synagogues that also have no indication, and that's done for security reasons.
Okay.
Because of rising anti-Semitism, we've never had any serious problems. We did have one break-in, but possibly it was just a break-in. But it's really quite interesting that in the 21st century, many synagogues are actually almost disguising the fact that they are synagogues from the outside, and I find that very sad indeed.
Absolutely. How has your synagogue adapted during COVID-19?
Well, like most places of worship and everything else public, we've been physically shut. So no one has been in the building since the original lockdown, or none that I'm aware of. So we do things on Zoom. And what's really quite interesting about doing it on Zoom is that participation has increased markedly. For the normal Saturday morning Sabbath services, we're probably getting at least double, possibly 3 times the number of people. For obvious reasons, it's a lot easier to just sit down at your computer. You don't have to dress nice. You don't have to travel into Cardiff if you don't live in Cardiff. It's not the same. You don't have quite the same atmosphere, and you obviously don't have the participation because everyone is told they have to mute themselves, because otherwise you just get this cacophony. But it's interesting that you'd have thought that losing use of the building would have had the opposite effect, and it didn't.
Oh, that's good. Who can attend a synagogue?
Well, in principle, anybody can attend, and people are welcome to attend. The only thing that we ask now is that you arrange in advance. And if you go on the website and just send a message saying, I would like to attend the service, you will be welcomed, assuming that we can at least verify that you're who you say you are, and we don't have any concerns about any disruption or anybody who's wanting to visit for what you will appreciate are the wrong reasons. But it's not an exclusive club. The services are certainly open to anybody who would like to, and Rune, you would be very welcome. Just arrange with me in advance, and I'll see that the security at the door, which is again is another sad thing, because I don't see why there is a need for security at the door, but there clearly is.
Yeah.
And so if you're expected, you are welcome, regardless of your faith or lack of faith.
That's great. I would really love to come and visit one day. What are you not allowed to do in a synagogue? So you go there and pray and worship. What are you not allowed to do?
There's really nothing that you're not allowed to do as such. The only thing I could think of that you'd not be allowed to do is to bring in unkosher food. You know, we have dietary laws, and we keep the synagogue, the congregation vary in terms of how strictly they obey the rules of kashrut or dietary laws, but we do agree that the synagogue itself is going to be kept kosher. So, for example, I mentioned that I host school visits very often. We tell the teachers that no, the kids can't bring a packed lunch and eat it in the synagogue. So that's the only thing I could think of that we don't allow. Could I just say at this point, Rune, I'm going ever slightly off your line of questioning.
It's okay,
but
it's okay.
There are two Jewish communities, if I can call it that, or divisions. There's lots of smaller ones, but broadly we divide into what we could call Orthodox or traditional and Reform or progressive. And there are two synagogues in Cardiff. The other one, which is the Orthodox, and the one that I belong to, which is the Reform. And as the name suggests, the traditional continue the traditions. We've always done it this way, we will always continue to do it that way. And we, being progressive, move with the times. And one way that we move with the times that's the most obvious if you were to visit the two synagogues is the role of women. Because within Reform Judaism, we make absolutely no distinction between gender. Men and women do everything together. There's no roles that are solely for men. And right up to rabbis, that we have women rabbis. So when I'm speaking about the Reform community, and I'm more familiar with that than the Orthodox. So if anyone Orthodox is watching this and saying, oh no, you must never do this in the synagogue, I hope they'll forgive me. That's the only thing I can think of within ours is bringing in non-kosher foods.
Okay. Do synagogue have other purposes?
Well, the function of a synagogue is much more than simply for worship. That's obvious. It's obviously its primary function, and the main reason why people come to synagogues on a regular basis is to attend services. But the synagogue itself, as a building, holds really community functions. And we have many social events. We have a large hall downstairs, and we have a very large kitchen, which can cater for large numbers of people. Possibly the most important function after the worship is the religion school that children come from about the age of 5 till 13 to learn about Judaism. We are a very small community, and there's no one in Wales who goes to a Jewish school. We don't have such things. They do in London and Manchester. And so the chances are that a child is going to be not only in a minority, but possibly alone as a Jewish child. My own children went to Welsh medium schools in Pontypridd and latterly in Rhydfelyn, and they were the only Jewish children ever. There were none before them, and there have been none since them, to the best of my knowledge. They're in their 30s now. And so if not for the religion school that we call a cheder, they'd never have met any other Jewish children. So one of the main functions of the cheder is to bring Jewish children together just so that they can meet each other and learn a little bit about Judaism and about Jewish festivals and holidays and traditions and history, songs, and of course the Hebrew language, which I'd like to talk about in a little bit more detail later, because it's an important part of Judaism.
What modern day challenges has the Jewish community faced?
That is assimilation. So many of our young people go through the cheder, which the religion school, which takes them up to age 13, where they have a bar or bat mitzvah. They become a full adult member of the community. They attend for a year or two, and then they drift away. They marry out of the faith, and they don't raise their children as Jews, and that is happening at a rate that's been accelerating for probably the last 100 years or so. But it's now reached the point where you can actually see communities shrinking significantly because young people are just drifting away and intermarriage. And that is a threat, because Judaism obviously won't survive if people just lose touch with it, and they're only Jewish by birth or upbringing, but not by practice.
You said you would like to talk about the Hebrew language, because this is a very important part of Judaism.
The Hebrew language, I've got some slides that perhaps can be brought up later. It's a bizarre alphabet in that it has no vowels. All the letters are consonants. And about 100 years ago or so, someone came up with a series of dots and dashes to help children to learn how to pronounce, because you obviously can't pronounce words without the vowels. So it's very strange in that, and that written in most things, including in our prayer books, we've got the dots and the dashes, and so it's quite easy to read if you know Hebrew. The Torah, and I would like to show you a Torah as part of my talk, does not have the vowels, and that makes it extremely difficult for even somebody who can read Hebrew to read, which is why we only have a few members of our community who can actually lead a service and read Torah when we don't have a rabbi. So it's an awkward language. The children that I have on the school visits are always fascinated when I hand out children's prayers book to them, because I say, what's the first thing you notice? And they all shout, it's backwards, because it's read from right to left. And so the back of the book is the front of the book. And then I explain to them that, no, it's not backwards. English is backwards because we were first. And also, there's nothing unique about the right to left. Arabic is written right to left. The Quran is written from right to left. And Persian, Farsi is written from right to left. It's not that unusual in itself, but they find that fascinating. And they learn enough Hebrew in their cheder to bring them up to the stage that they can actually participate in a service, but not fluent by any means.
Thanks, David, for today's interview. You absolutely answered all our questions and more, and we have more understanding now of the Judaism and the Jewish community in Cardiff and in Wales as well. Thank you very much.